What's up, my fellow scruffy looking nerf herders, and welcome to the Carbonite Chat. Today we're going to talk about how Yoda essentially destroyed an entire race of people and basically all the living on the planet that he went and visited. Now, this was shortly before the Phantom Menace, and actually we're hearing it from Luke, who's being told the story from the only remaining person from the planet. Now, this planet at one time had many blue mountains. Now, the blue mountains controlled what the people called stone power. The stone power is just another name for the force, and they needed it to be able to survive, and it also gave them power to continue on and work and do the things they needed to do. And for a while, this worked out very well because there was a very large amount of it, and the people kind of shared it equally. But some became very greedy and wanted more of the power for themselves. And this began kind of a world war between two different factions who became known as the Rock Hawkers and the Mudwhackers. And they fought against each other. And ultimately, by the time it was over, there was only one of these mountains left, because as they used more and more power to be able to fight against the other, it used up the stone power, and the blue stone started to disappear. And by the end of the war, there was only one mountain, and the Rockhawkers, who won the battle, then guarded it and protected it and used all the power for themselves. And the Mudhackers were left down at the bottom, and all they had was just a few stones that they were able to grab as they were kind of fleeing to get away. They then used the small amount that they had to do what they called sky screaming. They all huddled around the largest piece of the rock that they had, which wasn't very large, and they would essentially use their mind of the force to scream into the rock and cast it out into the sky, hoping that someone would hear and come to be able to help them. Now, they had never had a visitor from off-world, but this was their last-ditch effort, as they didn't have enough stone to be able to gain enough power to fight against the Rockhawkers. So they just did this day and night. This is how Yoda ended up finding him. He was on a mission to get this boy who was known to have force powers, and these group of pirates knew that the Jedi would want them. So they kidnapped the boy and held him, and they were going to use him as a ransom to be able to get money from the Jedi. And Yoda gets there, they mock him for his size as usual, and they then go and try to attack him because Yoda refuses to give them any money. And Yoda uses the Force and basically causes them to fight and hit each other. And by the end of it, they're all, hundreds of them, basically all dead on the ground. And Yoda walks out with the boy. When he walks out with the boy, you see that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are there. Yoda then asks them to take the boy with them back to the Jedi Temple, that Yoda has sensed a disturbance in the Force and he needs to go check it out and see what it is. Getting to the planet, he finds a group of children. Now, these children have war paint all over them, and they've got spears with these incredible blue tips to them. Of course, Yoda doesn't understand what the tips are at this point, and he tries to talk to the boys and say that he comes in peace, asks where their parents are, and they start talking about how he's something sent by the Rockhawkers, that it's a trap, let's destroy him. And so they start throwing spears trying to kill him, and Yoda, the power of the stone is so strong that Yoda's barely able to defend it, and the only way he's able to stop it is he lifts up all the rocks around him that then catch the spears and prevent him from dying. This then, it just absolutely amazes the children, and they can't believe that somebody that's not one of them understands to be able to use the Force and move things in a way. So they believe that he was sent to them, and they bring him to their camp and basically hope and try to convince him to be their rescuer and savior to destroy the Rockhawkers. Of course, this isn't the type of thing that Yoda is very much into, but they introduce him to one of the Rockhawkers that they captured and had in prison. Yoda then decides that he wants to take that Rockhawker and head to the other ones, and basically, as a sign of goodwill, return the boy to them, and then try to be able to talk to them and figure out what he can about the mountain and what this power and stone power is that's going on there. So he begins to head to take the boy there, but once they get there, he isn't met with another friendly group. He's met with a very angry group and a very powerful group, because they have been right at the base of this mountain this entire time, just soaking up the stone energy. And so as soon as Yoda tries to say, hey, I've got one of your people, they just call him a coward, and they say they don't even want him back and that they're going to kill him. And so they start throwing the spears at him, and he's barely able to hold it off, but he's actually captured by these people. In the next scene you see is he's actually in chains. Now, they saved him simply because he seemed to have a little bit of power, And what they do with all of their prisoners is they send them up the trail, up the mountain, to be able to try to find the heart of the mountain, which is believed to have the most powerful force stones. And so they send someone in, and they begin heading up there, him and this prisoner that they had had before, and the prisoner's continually telling them, like, this is pointless. Why are we going to go? We're going to die. No one's ever went in there and returned. And Yoda's trying to convince them, like, it'll be okay. We have to figure this out. I have to know what's going on. And the boy says, I'm not going any further. I won't do it. And apparently Yoda has been using kind of a mind trick on him to convince him to continue to go up the steps, because Yoda understands that the boy does not want to go up the steps any further. And then Yoda turns around, the boy's holding one of the blue force stones, and the boy says, as long as I've got this here, you can't use the mind trick on me. I know you've been using it on me, but you can't like this. I'm not going any further. And then he just jumps off the side of the mountain. As he's crawling down into the mountain, he finds a group of people. Now these are the parents of all of the children. The whole time, all Yoda had seen is just nothing but children. And they had said all the parents had disappeared and left. Well, the Rock Hawkers had sent all of the parents because they were basically blamed for starting the war. And then, of course, they took the parents of the other group that had lost and forced them in there to try to find the heart. And the parents, instead of ever returning, hid down inside of there and basically just defended for themselves and never came back out because they were scared of the children and said, let them just, have the war they want to have. Yoda doesn't agree with this, and they end up trying to basically kick Yoda out and shoo him away, saying that the mountain will destroy him. And so as he's going, he finds this one other child that's very injured and hurt, and Yoda tries to help him recover and come back. And during that time, by doing that, the child says that it's really more of a boy, a teenage boy, but he says that he'll give his life to Yoda for rescuing him. Yoda says, you don't have to do that, but what I do want you to do is teach me how to use this stone power. Explain to me, be my master, so that I can understand all these things that y'all know, because, Yoda's a very powerful Jedi that's been training for over thousands of years, and then there's these children that are able to overpower him and use the stone power much more than he is. So this boy begins to teach him and learn, and Yoda's slowly learning, and at one point actually pulls down part of the wall of this blue stone, and when he does, it reveals the heart of the mountain. Now when he gets there and sees this, Yoda realizes that this is no mountain. This is actually a living, breathing creature. And so he begins to kind of commune and meditate with the heart of the thing, trying to breathe back into it some more life. And he spends about 2 weeks doing this, day after day. And slowly the breathing and effort starts to come back into it. And as it does, the mountain begins to stand up, and it's this huge rock creature that has basically curled up into a ball to become the mountain, but now has been resurrected through the force of what Yoda is doing to this rock. When this begins to happen, though, the rock has been right next to and controlled mainly by the force power of these children. And so as it arises with fear, anger, hatred, and very much on the side of the dark side. As this begins to happen, the rock crawlers, they begin to fuel this anger and fuel it to try to destroy those around, because they're using the power of the stone in the largest way that they've ever possibly been able to use it. While this is going on, Yoda goes to the other people and tells them that they need to begin to meditate and try to be on the more positive side and be able to use their positive side to slow down and control the rock from the opposite side. While this is going on, the boy who was with Yoda in the mountain begins to teach the Rock Hawkers how Yoda was meditating and communing with it, so that their power and connection with it grows stronger and stronger. So now you have these two different factions, one trying to kind of use the dark side to control the mountain, the other trying to use the light side to control the mountain, and then this humongous blue mountain is walking out, and Yoda goes to meet it in the middle of kind of this plain. The mountain itself begins talking and kind of mocking Yoda for even being there, saying that he's so small that there won't even be anything left of him to bury. But Yoda stands strong, and as the monster begins to try to walk and step on top of it, Yoda is able to stop it with the force. Now this just shocks all of the children around as they're seeing what's happening. And they begin to work harder and harder. The leader of the rock hawker begins to say, anyone that doesn't do their duty to be able to cause this to kill Yoda, I'm going to kill you. And so finally the foot begins to come down on Yoda, but then Yoda has his lightsaber up in the foot of the rock. As the other children are kind of calling up this, more and more rock begins to kind of crawl up out of the ground and begin to renew itself as the planet's beginning to get a little bit more life as the stone force is growing. And there becomes like a war or battle between the rocks and stones. And basically the children begin to lose control of what it was. That you find out a little bit before this that actually prior to the war that began between the people and the stones were actually walking living creatures that wandered around the planet. But over time, as people figured out that they could gain power from the rock, they began to take from the rocks, the mountains moving, to the point that they weakened the mountains all the way until they just basically crawled and curled up. And then that was when there was a period of peace, I guess, as it was easier to control the rocks until they decided somebody wants more and more power than the other. But now the rocks have begun to separate themselves from the people and gain more and more power through what Yoda is using, I guess, some more of the positive side of the light and not as much fear and anger and hatred to control them, that some of those that are stagnant are slowly starting to come back up. Now this does start another type of all-out war with the stone side, and Yoda, the children now without control, specifically the rock hawkers, begin to try to attack Yoda, and Yoda, now being more understanding of how the stone power works, is able to hold them off fairly easily and just kind of scatters them and says, look, it's time. There's going to be some loss. This war is just beginning, but y'all have got to be able to work together, and it's no longer a time for y'all to war between each other. You'll need to settle your differences and fix everything the way it was. And then Yoda ends up flying off and leaving, and the narrator, the one boy who survives all of this, who is actually the boy that taught Yoda how to use his stone power, he says that ultimately not that many people died in the war, that they ended up settling their issues and differences. The one problem was that when Yoda left, they now no longer having this greed and anger to control the stone power, and the war between them kind of calming down and realizing that there was something outside of where they were at before, because they never had anyone come from off-world. They then decided that they wanted to start exploring and going out and finding other locations and seeing what was going on. So they began to build ships and all fly off planet to then go and explore. This all seems great, except for they all had been raised off of and had learned to live and survive off of the stone power. And as they flew away and got off from the planet, the more and more they got away, the more they ended up dying off, as they didn't have the stone power to kind of sustain their life. And on the reverse side, the stone that was there needed the people to be able to thrive and live off of. And as they all flew away and left, the stone, the mountains, began to die off as well. And the only one that was left was that one boy. So in some weird roundabout way and all of that, Yoda, by trying to help and teach a lesson and end a war, ends up killing an entire race of people and leaving an entire planet basically in complete destruction by what he was doing. And I look forward to hearing your responses. If you like the video, you can like it. I'll post my Last Jedi stuff. I have a Last Jedi rant on how much I despised it, and I have how to fix The Last Jedi, and I'll have that in a playlist right here. You can watch either one of those videos or both, and I'll have the rest of the playlist for this series I'm doing, The Journey of the Whills, right here, and I'll post my Star Wars Rebels playlist right here, where I'm going through all of the episodes leading into the series finale, and I'm just doing kind of the Easter eggs and facts behind all of the episodes that are from the very beginning all the way up to that point. So thank you guys again for watching, and never forget, you nerf herders, I love you.
I know